This is Can I Laugh on Your Shoulder? Hey, welcome to Can I Laugh on Your Shoulder? I'm Molly Stillman, and this is a podcast where each week I usually get to sit down with a different guest and we have raw, funny, often brutally honest conversations about the things that matter most. Faith, business, life, and everything in between, where we each learn how to be good stewards of the things we've been entrusted with, even our stories, and how we can use those things to serve others and our friends and our families and our communities and make them a little better than we found them. I want to create a space where people are unafraid to be themselves and unafraid to ask the questions the rest of us are thinking. My goal is to make you laugh, cry, and laugh till you cry. Well, I'm so excited because today's episode is episode 400 of the Can I Laugh on Your Shoulder podcast. And if you had told me in the summer of 2016, nearly 8 years ago, when I started this podcast, it was formerly known as Business with Purpose. But when I started this podcast 8 years ago, if you told me that I would still be here 8 years later and I will have published 400 episodes, and really with some of the bonus episodes, like over 400, but we're going to just go with it. 400 episodes, I don't know that I would have believed you. And I don't necessarily know what I was expecting when I started this podcast all those years ago. But to be here at such a huge milestone of 400 episodes is just unbelievable to me. It's truly unbelievable. And so I wanted to just do something a little different. This is going to be a shorter episode, but it's really just supposed to be celebratory. And also, I'm going to answer a couple questions that have been asked a lot through social media or email just over the years, and just share a few insights of things that I've kind of learned over the past 400 episodes, 400 interviews, and doing this as long as I have. But first, I just wanted to say thank you. If you are here and you are watching this on YouTube, which is new this year, having the video part of the podcast available on YouTube. If you are watching this on YouTube, if you're listening to this on any podcast platform, on my website, wherever, I just want to say thank you, because if there were nobody listening, I wouldn't still be doing this. Well, maybe I would. I don't know, but that would maybe be silly. But I do this show because of you, and I do this show to be able to connect with you. And when I get messages from you saying, oh, I had a long road trip and we binged the last 20 episodes, or, I love listening to this podcast when I'm folding laundry or I'm mowing the lawn or in my car with my kids, whatever it is, wherever you listen, I am here because of you, and I get to have these really incredible conversations with people that I would never otherwise get to connect with. And so I'm just unbelievably humbled and grateful that you would take time out of your busy lives to listen to the sound of my voice in your ears. So truly, there are not enough thank yous in the world for your support. And obviously, a lot has happened in 8 years. I have had some ups and downs in life. My family and I went through a really hard time in 2018 when we lost a couple of children, and I continued to podcast through that. And I got to hear from so many of you who just said that you were encouraged and that you really learned a lot from me during that time. I published my first book. We moved to a farm. I mean, a lot of life has happened, not to mention a pandemic, and the fact that you have stuck around and that you have kind of grown with me, and you've stuck through the rebrand, and you've brought your friends. It really means a lot. So again, thank you, thank you, thank you. So like I said, in a way to just celebrate this big milestone, I wanted to just answer a couple of questions that I have gotten a lot over the years. And I thought it would be maybe helpful to just kind of have them in this one space. So, it's going to be fun. I don't have a script. I have the questions that I've written down, but other than that, we're just going with it. So anything can happen. So let's get into it. So question number 1 is, why did you start this podcast and how has your motivation evolved over time from when you first started? So for those that maybe are newer to listening to the podcast, you might not know why I started this podcast or, what it was. And maybe you didn't even know that it used to be called Business with Purpose. So I started this podcast in the summer of 2016, and I used to work in radio, which many of you know, maybe you don't, but I had a job in radio, and I even had like a short stint doing a podcast back in like 2007 when podcasts first started, but nobody knew what it was, and so nobody was really listening, and there was just a very different time in the podcasting world, and so I kind of put it to the side, and then I obviously did radio work, and I just really loved the form of or the medium of audio. And so I had talked about doing, I had a blog and had a blog for a long time. And so I had talked about doing a podcast for a very long time. And then finally, I think in the fall of 2015, I believe, 2015, I had mentioned, doing, a podcast again. And my husband finally looked at me and he was like, would you stop talking about it and just actually do it? But then it took, through the winter and spring to really plan it because I was just honestly overthinking it. And I just knew that I wanted to have conversations with really interesting people. I was really at the time, I mean, and still today, but especially at that time, I was really heavy and passionate in the ethical and fair trade fashion space. And so I wanted to create a space where I could interview business owners of these ethical and fair trade businesses or people that were using business as a force for good. And so that was why the podcast was originally called Business with Purpose. And I loved it. And I got to talk to all kinds of business owners, and I had just really incredible interviews. And some of those early interviews are some of my favorite. And, but the reality is it just began to evolve. And so kind of the second part of that question was, how has my motivation evolved over time? And really, I just loved hearing people's stories, which was why I eventually rebranded it away from Business with Purpose, because truth be told, I think it was a little bit of an inhibitor, that title, because I think people thought, oh, this is just a business podcast and I don't own a business, so this isn't necessarily something that I need to listen to, when it really wasn't. It was really more just about the stories behind these people that were doing really incredible things. And so I was more interested in creating this space to have conversations where we could share anything about our lives and faith and business and parenting and marriage and friendship and work. I mean, anything, just life, and to be able to laugh and to cry and to have hard conversations and good conversations and encouraging conversations, whatever it was. And so that was where Can I Laugh on Your Shoulder came from. And so that's why I rebranded it, but continued to do it, and all under this umbrella. And so really my motivation has stemmed from, I'm fascinated by people and I'm fascinated by stories. And I want to continue doing this because I mean, I just love getting to know people and learning from people who, think differently from me. And, obviously not every guest I fully agree with, but I think it has created a space where we listen to understand rather than listen to respond. And so even if there is a guest that I have on that I don't necessarily agree with 100%, like, I think we all get to see each other's humanity, and we all get to learn from each other when, even if there's something about what the other person says that maybe, we don't fully align with. But I think in general, I think we all see the commonness, in who we are as humans. So anyway, that was a longer answer to that first question than I thought, but here we go. All right. So question number 2 is, what has been your most memorable moment, or episode in the podcast journey? So, this might be a strange answer, but this is truly, I think, what it was. So obviously I've gotten to interview a lot of really amazing people and people I admire. But truly my most memorable moment is, when we moved to the farm and I set up my recording studio here in my little office. Some of you may or may not know that my office is on it's just a small little room on the first floor of our house that um, is actually like right off of our front porch. And so like, if you're watching this on YouTube, like where this hand is, there's a window, and where this hand is, there's like a little door that has a window, and that at the front porch. And we have animals, and they all free range. And one day I was in the middle of interviewing. I won't say who it was, but it was let's just say like a pretty well-known person. And I was like kind of nervous for the interview. And I was like, I just really want this interview to go well. And we had turkeys at the time. And all 10 of our turkeys decided to come up on my front porch and were, 2 feet away from me, like right here, standing at my window, pecking the window and gobbling as loud as they could, just like making turkey sounds right there while I am trying to record. And so I had to like pause and apologize that my turkeys were making all this noise. So I had to like literally stop the recording, go outside and chase the turkeys away, all while this poor person waited for me to do it. And it was just really hilarious. And I said to her when I came back to re-record, I was like, is that the first time that's ever happened to you when you were on a podcast? She said, yeah, and probably will be the last as well. So anyway, she was a good sport about it, but it was very, very funny. Okay. So question number 3 is, who has been your favorite guest on the show and why? So obviously 400 episodes, I have had a lot of guests. So picking a favorite is nearly impossible. So, but if I'm going to just be that guy and I'm going to have to answer, I'm going to have to say probably of all time, it's probably going to have to be Kev on Stage. Kevin Fredericks, aka Kev on Stage. I had him on in the summer of 2019, and he's one of my favorite comedians. He's so funny, and I think I just like laughed the entire episode. So it was maybe not even that good of an episode, or maybe it was, because I just was laughing the whole time. But if I have to answer, maybe more personally, selfishly, that is probably my favorite episode, because I just love his comedy. I love his sense of humor, and yeah, the whole thing was just so much fun. All right. The next question is, how do you prepare for each podcast episode, and what does your typical recording day look like? So for those that don't know, so I do have a producer or a production company, Third Wheel Media, that does like the editing and kind of the basic show notes for the show. But other than that, I do everything else. And then for the YouTube, I do all that as well. And so I'm the one that does all the booking. I am the one that communicates with the guest, or the agency for the guest. So, for as far as preparing for each episode, it can look a little different depending on who the guest is. So if the guest has a book coming out or has a book, I try to do my best to read the book. That is not always realistic. If I have like 8 interviews in 1 week, I can't necessarily I can't necessarily read 8 books in 1 week if I just don't have the time. But I always at least start their books, or I always read the books of the guests that I interview, but I just might not be able to finish the book by the time I get to the interview. So but I try to at least read the beginning, a little bit of the middle, and a little bit of the end if I know I'm not going to be able to read the whole thing. I know some podcasters that are like hardcore, they will finish a book, and I would love to get to that point, but because of my current recording schedule, that's just not totally realistic. But I do, again, I try to read their book. And then I do what I always refer to as my light to moderate internet stalking. So I try to watch or listen to other interviews. So I kind of see what questions they've been asked before, so I don't repeat those questions. I try to just dig a little bit deeper. Sometimes some people have come with press kits, but I try to just get to know who this person is. And so prep time for each episode can be anywhere from 1 to, 24 hours, depending on who the person is and how much I know about them. If it's somebody that I know really well, then obviously a little less prep might go into that episode. But if it's somebody that I'm not super familiar with, then more prep will need to go into the episode. And then for me, I don't necessarily block record. It's more, I will sometimes schedule a couple interviews in a day. But it's not like I don't have a set day of the week that I do interviews. And those interviews can take anywhere from, an hour to 2 hours, depending on, from start to finish. So some days I've had, 3 or 4 interviews in a day, and those are pretty long days, but I really love it. And then as far as, then the day before the podcast comes out, I have to, do all of the graphics and the show notes and getting it all uploaded. And so that can take a while as well, but it's really fun. And I really enjoy the preparation part because I like to try to be a little bit creative in what I might ask that guest or what I might do in that interview. Okay, the next question is, how do you stay inspired amidst challenges and setbacks? So I think I kind of answered this in the, my motivation for the show. But I think, over time, again, I try to I don't want to just do the same thing over and over and over again for years and years and years. So I try to just think about what are different things that I can include in the show, or what can I do to keep it fun. And so, whether I change up how I end the show, or if there's a new set of questions that I might ask, or, you know, again, I think a lot of it really stems too from who I'm interviewing. And if the person I'm interviewing is someone that might inspire me to try something different. And honestly, like, because I get to talk to so many interesting people who have really great life stories, or they're just, they're leaders in their field or whatever, a lot of times those things are just the inspiration that I need. Podcasting is hard. I've done this every single week for nearly 8 years. And so this is not something that you go into lightly. It doesn't, it takes time, it takes work. It doesn't necessarily always make money. It hasn't made money for me in a couple of years. It has made money for me in the past. But you have to decide, like, what is your why? What is your motivation? And the reality is that for me, my why and my motivation for doing this is because of the stories that I hear from listeners when they share how a particular episode has impacted or inspired them or changed their lives. And so that's why I keep doing it. So I hope that answers that question. And then the last question is, what is one piece of advice you have taken away from a guest that you've really implemented this year? And I can honestly say that when I had Ginny Urich of 1000 Hours Outside on my podcast towards the end of 2023, just that whole episode in general, there was something about our conversation that just really, I think, shifted my focus and so many things about motherhood and so I think this is going to sound maybe a little bit silly, but I think I was in such a fog of getting ready to release a book that I had forgotten the simplicity of life. And what I mean by that is focusing on the little things, like just really taking time to be present with my kids and be present with my husband, and to just not overcomplicate the beauty of being outside, and not overcomplicate the beauty of allowing myself and my kids to be bored, not overcomplicating the beauty of rest. It sparked some amazing conversations between me and my kids and me and my husband. And so I don't know that it's necessarily one piece of advice, but just that whole episode with Ginny, really thinking about that, like, we live in a world that is constantly trying to rush us, trying to hurry us, trying to take our attention away from things that matter, and put our attention on things that don't. And it was a reset that I needed it's actually what inspired me to, I'm for the most part taking the summer off of work. And I am not recording any episodes over the summer. I've already recorded every single episode that will air this summer. And so I did that really intentionally so that I can just slow down and be present with my husband and my kids. And I did that in large part because of that conversation with Ginny. And I know that that's not realistic for everybody, but it's just something that I really decided to make some sacrifices in other areas of life to be able to prioritize that this summer. So, yeah, I hope that I hope that answers your question. And again, I wanted to say thank you so much for all of your support over the years, and thank you for being with me through 400 episodes. Thank you for your support of my first book, If I Don't Laugh, I'll Cry. Thank you for your comments and your reviews, and I'm just so grateful, and I love that I get to do this for a living. And one of the best gifts you could give me in celebration of 400 episodes is, would you find your favorite episode over the past 400, and would you share it on social media? And tag me. You can tag me at Still Being Molly and at Can I Laugh Pod on Instagram. And I would just love to hear from you. And I would love for you to share your favorite episode, and just encourage people to listen and to leave a review. It really, really means the world. And thank you, as always, to the team at Third Wheel Media. Thank you for Grace. Thank you to Grace for editing this show every week and making me sound way better than I actually do. Thank you to Molly and the team at Third Wheel for doing the show notes and just those little things that I just don't have the bandwidth to do myself. And you guys doing it just means so, so much. So thank you so much for your support. I love you all, and we'll see you all next week. Bye.